morning, Prusam Ramdan, with you here today at your office to have a little conversation about the book you published some time ago, actually in 1990, book called In the Track, Life After Life. I've known you for a long time, and if you allow me to call you Jimmy as I call you, and use this opportunity to go a little bit in what you shared in your book. Just to begin with, why In the Track?
Good morning. The title In the Track was given because I felt every human being has a direction in life. And how we choose our direction very often is based on a subjective point of view, but more often we are bound to select the objective way. But when we follow the objective way, we are very much biased by the way the society goes on. And that's where I try to use the word in the track in a more spiritual way. In the sense that we are searching for a direction, and a direction which will give us comfort, solace, peace, and a high degree of happiness, as opposed to pain, sorrows, and difficulties. So that's why I chose the title as In the Track.
Yes, I've been through the book, and as you turn over to page 3, I was struck by a few things. And I read a little paragraph there. Everyone born on earth has the same goal, except some find it earlier than others. Some find it in this life, others take many lifetimes, i.e. his soul has to be born again and again and again until the goal is achieved. How does one, as you say, find what others can't find in this life?
I think question of not finding is not there, because all is a matter of whether you believe there is a power, a force beyond material. If you believe there is a force beyond material, which we give it the name of God or any other word, then obviously that becomes different, in the sense that if you really believe there is a God, then one has to see the purpose of life, and the purpose becomes a kind of goal. So everybody can achieve it, but how we achieve it and when becomes a big question. For example, if a person believes in God and know that the idea of goal is to become part of God or part of nature or part of energy, positive energy, then you're bound to cleanse your mind, body and soul. How do you do that? Is by avoiding the negative force, avoiding the temptation that surrounds us, and dabble into purity, in the sense you do what your conscience believes is right rather than going against your conscience. But to achieve that, we are very often distracted by all kinds of temptations, namely money, good food, cars, materials. So these are matters which takes us away and prevent us achieving the goal in the number of lifetime you can. So that's what I mean by some people can achieve it in shorter time, others may take many years, many lifetime. And I got some comfort in my thought through the teachings of Buddha. For example, Buddha does describe that it is not easy to fight temptation, because temptation is so deeply rooted in our body and mind that we cannot just cast it aside. But some people can, and they do. Therefore, your need to live many lifetimes is not important. You might do it in lesser time. That's what I meant by saying that some people achieve it in shorter time, others take many, many, many lifetime.
You've talked about conscience. How would somebody who's listening to us understand the way you want a person to listen to his or her conscience? What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, conscience is something, I believe, planted naturally, is inherent in human body, in human mind, and in human way of living. For example, conscience is something that really tells you what you're doing is wrong or right. And this, you can even see it from your very childhood. For example, if your parents tells you you are 2 or 3 not to do it and you've done it, and when the parent asks, there is a fear that comes in, you immediately realize that what I did was wrong, and yet you did it. So life goes on in that way. Conscience is a matter, I think, very spiritual, in the sense that is an awareness in you which really tells you that what you're doing is wrong, and yet you go on to do it. And when you're doing something right, your conscience is not even appearing in the scene, is not even there. So every human being in his inner self, in his own mind, he is aware of this conscience, because they do know what wrong they're doing and what right they're doing. So that's what I mean by conscience here.
It seems that human beings are trapped into a permanent battle between conscience saying one way and a sort of a drive to do something else, which in terms is translated into good or bad. First, there is that sort of battle, ongoing battle, but would that bring you to a sort of a myth to explain humanity's condition?
Well, good and bad forms part of humanity. With purely being good, you will not probably be born. Again, go back to philosophy of spiritualism and Buddha, that when you become totally good means you have reached an awareness of an enlightenment, a light where you don't see any darkness. So being good is reaching perfectness. But being born human, you are mixed with good and bad. That's why you have to live many lifetimes, because one lifetime is not enough to eliminate all the bad. All the bad is referred in a spiritual term as negative. And people do know that what they're doing is good or bad. And yet they continue doing what is in their interest at the material time. And you can't stop it. But being able to stop it is what makes an issue of going in the direction of goodness.
You mentioned a lot about Hinduism in your book. How would you summarize the teachings of Hinduism?
Well, Hinduism has never been as such a teaching matter. The whole Hinduism has developed through practical life. if one has to look at Gita, for example, which depicts the story or the writings of people in relation to the Lord Krishna, which is revered as a god, one of the gods of India, the story tells you life has to be practical. You act, you behave, you do things in a way which is practical for that time. For example, if it is necessary for everybody to drink a dirty water and you have no choice, you have to be practical to survive and you do it. But you do not use the dirty water after 100 years. You say, but you see, in the time of Lord Krishna, there was this dirty water, and he said, you have no other water, drink it. So therefore, we revere it as a kind of myth or a kind of spiritual things, and you say, well, let's drink this water because the Lord Krishna had said so. But that was not what it was meant. What it was meant that one has to be practical to survive under the prevailing circumstances.
So are you trying to portray out a sort of a new Hinduism, jettisoning some practices, some old or archaic traditions?
No, I think I am not in any way practicing or renovating or renewing. I think Hinduism is a very old traditional way of living where life changes according to circumstances, and that is what has been said in Gita, that time is timeless. What he means by that what is today, tomorrow it might not be so, but time will go on. You cannot use yesterday's time, whatever happened, and adapt it in today's life. You have to adapt your time, your ways according to today's time and the circumstances in which you are living.
Yeah, but surely there is an essence that doesn't change throughout time. And what would be that essence?
No, the essence is very much the conscience, that the conscience and the need. Sometimes needs become very important, so important that your life depends on it. If that's the case, then the conscience will become secondary. But if the need is such that you can do without, then the conscience prevail, which means back to, is it right to do what I'm doing? If it is not right what I'm doing, then can we have an alternative? So that's where conscience comes in. And the matter of good, bad is very relative depending on the circumstances in which you are involved.
One of the chapters of your book deals with the multitude of Hindu gods.
Yeah.
It seems that was a question that was on your mind and you wanted to address the issue, and you keep coming to it throughout the book.
Yes.
And if I do read one little extract, where you refer to this particular question itself, and I read, Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita preaches Arjuna in minute details about life, and he exclaims the existence of only one God. He refers to the multitude of gods. If care is taken to understand the meaning of God and gods, and to give it simple and literal meaning, there cannot be a conflict or confusion. It is accepted religiously that God is the creator and ruler of the universe, whereas God is referred to as a superhuman being who is worshipped as having power over nature and human affairs. Could you expand on this a little bit?
Yes. What I mean to say here, we have to probably logicalize in a practical term that if you put two captains in a ship, it is literally known to every intellectual or practical person that the ship might drown, because you can't one ship going north and south at the same time. So my concept of one God is one God. What my experience tells me that a god could be a very powerful energy which has all the elements of a life with many directions at the same time. So that God remains supreme. But in India, what has happened, they adopted millions of gods because from the concept that was given or made available to Indian people was that we have to revere and respect every life. Life doesn't only mean the one that you see something moving, but even plants, because it is quite clear that plants also or have life. So in India, if somebody is sitting under a tree, for example, alone, he might concentrate and meditate over the tree, and at the end of the day, he might see a lot more things in the tree, about the tree, than otherwise. And then he might call it a power, call it something which deserves respect. So anything that he believes there is a respect or power, he calls it directly, indirectly like a god, because a power he cannot really see, cannot do, but there is power in it. Probably today we discover that if you want to naturally have a good environment, having a lot of trees, plants, all this are very helpful, and that help the environment to grow. So my view of having multitude of gods expands from trees to human being to animals. For example, if you see that an animal is roaming around, take example of a wolf or some animal of those sort, a child or baby is dying or whatever, you see an animal approaching that child, having a sense, a kind of attraction through wavelength, and the wolf might feel pity and help the child, the baby, in one way or another. And then that comes a kind of miracles to people. That's what has happened. So the question, when the moment you raise the point of miracles, then immediately you are connected to a superpower, a power which is not logically explained, but the power exists. So that is where the Indian developed that kind of attitude of taking from man, animal, whoever, shown a power beyond the norm, call it a god. A god for them is some energy, some force, some power, which has assisted them in the time of need in a way which is not normal, not physical, but something beyond. And that's where I believe that India came about with starting to preach, teach, revere, and love like a god, things like rock, animal, or whatever, a picture, whatever they have seen or used or actually thought, they just revere it in that sense. That's how India came to be known with millions of gods. But bottom line is that is a respect of that power that they notice, they seen, they experience, that make them call it a god. And that is the myriads of gods for them.
Yes. So God is the generic term used to refer to force or power. But would you say that in Hinduism, the correct understanding of Hinduism would be that there is one God, as it is understood in other cultures?
Yes, this has been explained, and how we can see it is there is an inference made in the Indian culture, because they say that there were three well-known gods in the same superpower revered and always prayed in temples everywhere else, that there were three gods like Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. But then there is an inference made that there could not be three gods of equal power going around and administering the whole earth. I believe that they also indirectly have revered and referred to some other superpower, other gods which is unique, which they themselves could not identify. And that's where the Hindus, the Indians, have remained more a stalemate in respect of the three gods rather than one god. But the three gods themselves have made inference as to be having one powerful god.
Right. One aspect of Hinduism which is not known or probably not talked about, would you say that there is a messianic aspect, i.e., I say it this way, the return of Shiva on earth in some future times?
Well, I think if really a person is very religious, is like a magnet being very close to a metal, however small, it can attract. At this present moment in India itself, you have people who have got such power which they don't demonstrate or they don't use, which is very, very powerful, very mysterious, which is above the norm. Whether a Messiah will come and say, I am a Messiah, it will never happen now as it happened in the days of Christ or in the days of Prophet Muhammad. What will happen now is you will find probably a person next to you walking, might be he's transcended into a god transcended or disguised as a man, and will be saying or speaking or saying things which is out of the world. Either you, if you have enough intelligence or ability, you might either say he's somebody divine, very powerful, or a godlike, or you will call him a madman. So basically in India, we have literally every day people prophesying generally, but we are not able to know who he is, what he is.
You ask yourself the question in the book, and you say, why Hindu god or gods have so many heads and arms?
Well, you see, the whole understanding of gods having so many heads and arms are very simple. You see, a human being, when they're looking at a person directly, they have one angle. If you look at the same person from another angle, the face, everything distorts. You find a different person. So the number of angles you are using may dictate the number of heads you have. In this, that's a literal sense. But in the sense that God was there, is the idea of many heads came, that God is everywhere and can see you from any angle. And whatever you are seeing is not what you are exactly seeing. It becomes a mystery, a mysterious situation, an enigma to the mind. And he's explaining, this has been explained, that a God of many heads is capable of performing literally anything that is to be performed, either with the head or with the arms. So the idea of many heads, many arms came about when a physical matter of maybe 10 things which are to be addressed at the same time, God has the power to do the same thing. All the 10 issues to be solved can be done in one go. But the heads and the arms is a physical term, as if each head can tackle one problem. If there's million problems to solve, there will be million heads. And if million hands or feet are required, you can see it. So the idea of having so many heads and so many arms and legs are based on a kind of practicality that is shown to people, that gods can achieve anything and doesn't have to be seen as one head, because God can have millions of heads if he wants to. That's a formation of energy. Energy, like for example, to understand energy, let's take an example of a child being born. The kind of sperm you require to have a baby formed is extremely small drop of your sperm. And yet that little sperm developed into a human being of a very big, massive size. Equally, in an animal, the same thing. That small little dot can make a monster of 20 tons of size. So the energy itself, now you can imagine, if the energy is interpreted in a similar way, albeit you can't see the energy. So you can imagine, if that can be the case, what can happen if you have an energy which is just of the size of a football, how many things and how much things it can do, if we can compare that. That's what it is, in my opinion, of course.
You do address the issue of caste system in Hinduism. And in fact, is again one of your chapters, chapter 7. What do you have to say about the caste system?
Well, caste system in India is a fabrication by people due to circumstances, the society, the environment, and it is something has been more used as an economic factor and political factor from 20,000 years back. It is a very simple issue to address, but because people find it very convenient to keep it, preserve it, they do so. In Gita itself, which is only about 4,000-5,000 years old, but it preaches that it is wrong to think about people being of this caste or that caste, because that never existed. We created it. For example, we know for a fact that a person who is educated got the opportunity to educate himself. He reads a book. For example, like in India, you had the sophisticated language of Sanskrit, and all the prayers or whatever they were using were in Sanskrit. To be able to interpret Sanskrit in the common dialect of the country or the village, you need to be educated. So those who are able to interpret it, they call themselves priest or whatever, high level educated people. And that's where one caste is formed. Then another one would say, well, I'm a strong guy with a bulky body, a very strong ability to tackle things, do things, and that guy call himself in the sense of India a warrior, because they were able to fight or defend or whatever. So that becomes another caste. Those who were extremely unlucky, uneducated, unable to do any work which is of any higher rank, became the lowest caste, because he can only do the lowest of the things. That's how the caste came about. But basically in India, they have exploded as a matter of convenience, and they want to preserve it. For example, today, in a family of those who call themselves priests, there will be some of them born totally unable to study and unable to do any proper job which is of their rank by caste system. They're unable to do it, and yet they call themselves still a high caste. So it is very much a matter of convenience and a matter of economic and politics, which is being preserved, nothing more.
Are you preaching for the abolition of the caste system altogether, completely, as it were just a social arrangement of the previous times?
No, you see, these are matters you cannot ask for abolition, you cannot destroy it, because it is, in fact, inculcated, integrated in a system. It is only time that can wash away the things. For example, if a child is born of the lowest caste and is able to go to university, study, and reach the class scale, then that person will be no longer in the caste that was called yesterday to be the lowest caste. So it is only the time factor which probably will wash away all these. Now, when people come to have the equal ability and equal facility to improve life, then the caste system will automatically die out, just like we have got in Europe now. With time, in the time before, it existed here as well. 300 years ago, there was a slave, there were people who were doing menial job, etc., laborers and whatnot. And when the country became economically in the same level, everybody has an opportunity to go to college, study, become a professional and whatnot. Then naturally the system died out. So much so, now people don't even think that a caste system existed in Europe. But it was there in the past. So all I'm saying, bottom line, is that the question of abolition and all this will not come by any particular people or person, but the system itself will exterminate this caste system.
Would you say there is something called Hindu law?
Hindu law may have come because in the olden time there were practical, each village has a practical way of dealing with matters, and these were the rules. And obviously, naturally, overall in India, to unify those rules, to make people follow the same thing, they may have called it, well, that's the Hindu law, in the sense, because in India, one has to understand, India exists from knowledge book point of view over 10,000 years. So they had the ability to write, ability to express. So the question of law was already there written, but there was no such thing as Hindu law, but it was a law of the culture that existed, because the word Hindu itself didn't exist. So there is no question of having a Hindu law. It would have been the law of the country. At a particular time, India was referred as Bharat, and the word Bharat came from one of the perfect king that existed. He created a kind of perfect law that existed at that particular material time, and his fairness, reasonableness, and the ability to see justice being done, justice being seen to be done, came from Bharat. And therefore the name Bharat, India name, was Bharat. Now name has come up from all kind of like, in the word India come from, again, from the word Indraprasth, which was a perfect castle made, and it was a very common name which was so much admired, and the word India must have come from Indraprasth. So that is where name has been given willy-nilly in one way or another. But the word Hindu itself is not an Indian word. It's not a word coming from the land itself. It's just an artificial name which has been adopted and used.
Today there is a lot of talk about dialogues between religion, and how do you think, from the point of Hinduism or from the point of being a Hindu, how can one contribute to such a dialogue or to open understanding, which probably is not there at the moment?
Well, I think when you say dialogue, between what? Between whom? The countries, for the village, or country to country?
For example, the Vatican is quite involved in fostering dialogues between Islam and Christianity or Judaism. So, what would be the standpoint? I ask you this question because in your book you do deal with Hinduism and other religions. I mean, probably that's the term was before its age, but chapter 8 does deal with how you would open out to other religions.
Well, first we got to understand what is religion, and secondly we got to understand what problems are arising or occurring or existing. India, one has to understand that doesn't have a religion, it has a culture. And the culture changes. What it was 4,000 years ago is very different today. Whereas many people found that it is easier to follow a kind of religion which is written down, give them guidance. And giving them guidance is like showing them a direction. But the direction they're looking for is for their material comfort. And obviously, if you're looking for that, then those Hindus, Indians, today, majority of, in India you will see, not majority, but quite a lot, have changed the culture from the Indian culture to a religion, either Christianity, joined Christian faith, or Islam. That is because they did not find a direction to their comfort in the Indian culture. And Indian culture is very wide and very difficult to really assimilate unless you have some basic intelligence. If you don't have that basic intelligence, it's easier to choose the path of a religion, which somebody sit there and explain to you what is written, rather than going somewhere where nothing is written. You have to follow your conscience. You keep your conscience as your guidance.
You're saying there is no book to read, no hermeneutics.
No, in India,
walk of consciousness.
Yeah, if we're talking of India, India has always lived, existed, and will continue for many years to come with a culture. The culture itself is inculcated. That gives them, that it has also become part of their conscience. And that exists. And if you want to turn it into a religion, then you might have to spend days and days and years to write, like is written in a Bible, what A did, what you should do. But then again, you come back to a great difficulty, and it is not advised to do that, because what is happening today, tomorrow will be very different. Therefore, what you write as a religion, tomorrow it will not be the case, but because it is a religion followed, you might have to continue by force to follow what is unnatural, totally wrong, the time is wrong, then you become bound. Like
the answer you're giving is to listen to your conscience.
Well, conscience plays a very important part, because if we really know any human being who is decent enough to admit that whenever he is doing wrong, he knows it. He knows he is doing wrong. And if he can stop it, that is the biggest religion, that's the biggest guidance that a man can have, which I believe is implanted by God. Ask even a child of 3-4 year old, if you tell him not to do and he's done something, you will see how he will tremble. If, for example, you see you have done something very wrong, illegal, a criminal act, you hear the door knocking and somebody says somebody is coming, first thing come in your mind, in your conscience, and you feel afraid in case they're coming after you. Your heart rate start beating faster. If you hear there's a police, it might go much faster because your guilt is telling you, tell the whole body, the fear automatically comes in. So the conscience is an element which is there all the time. And a man who does things according to his conscience in the right way, it doesn't matter who is going to knock the door. It doesn't matter how many police officers will come. He will stay indifferent, wait for it, what is there to be answered or not, and that's how it goes. Therefore, conscience remains a very important factor in a human being, which they betray all the time. And in my opinion, conscience is such that when people talk about disease and many other factors, conscience plays a very important part. If all the time you're living with fear, your pulse rate is all the time going up and down like a yo-yo, you're deregulating your body because your conscience is telling you all the time you did this wrong. Every time somebody knocks your door, you're afraid that they're coming for you, etc. So you are in difficulties, and that conscience, because of the pulse rate of your body is being destabilized, that can cause you a serious problem. And I think this conscience is also a thing in the body that causes you more harm than you can imagine. And many diseases could be coming from that, which we haven't yet understood or explored, whether scientifically or otherwise.
I mean, what would be your word of advice to anybody who's listening to us to start being conscious-minded or consciousness-minded?
I think any human being should try his best to understand the difference between good and bad. If a person follows what is good, he's got his mind, his body more sound than otherwise, because a negative factor which is bad causes a lot more harm to the mind and the body and the peace that they want to acquire. So my advice simply would be that a person should avoid doing wrong as much as he can and follow the path of good rather than the opposite.
Thank you, Jimmy. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.